Lend your ears, lend your hands, lend your movement, anything you can. Come to teach, come to be taught, come in the likeness and the image of God. 'Cause you can be like that, with all that humbleness and all that respect. All of the power
We're going to talk about
invested in me.
NGO foundations. Let's get started. So, for centuries, power was wielded by force, wasn't it? Might was right. Yeah? So, a great picture there from one of my favourite movies with Mel Gibson there. Great movie. There's also a scene there of somebody being horse-drawn and quartered. Can you believe we used to do that to people? In fact, they still do in some parts of the world. They'd tie a horse to your extremities and whap them on the arse, and away you'd go. You'd be dismembered. And they would do this in public to express their might over you. But ruling by force was not going to work forever, was it? It was expensive, it was dangerous, and open to constant upheaval from within. Ruling the mind was far more cost-effective, which is what they do now, and it was a more productive and clever way forward. The slave masters, and I'm sure I'm in a room of people that understand that we still have slave masters. The slave masters realised that they could gain far more by letting the slaves believe they were free and could own something. Therefore, they would work harder to keep it. If you chain slaves up, they're going to do the bare minimum of work so that they don't cop a flogging, don't they? When you tell somebody that they own their house and they own their car, they're going to work pretty hard to keep it, aren't they? It was a far better way for them. So this is where the expression came in. The pen replaced the sword as a more powerful form of control, hence the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I want to talk here quickly about the slave-master relationship. Now, I'm not a Christian. I've got many beautiful Christian friends. But this is all based on the Bible. If you go to court, what do they ask you to put your right hand or your left hand, I don't even know which one it is, and swear an oath on? I can assure you that a lot of the laws and court systems are based on things that came out of the Vatican and then through the church. So the story goes that Creator, Yahweh, God, Source, whatever you want to call it, they say God created man in his own image. Might be the other way around. But the Creator created man in his own image. So who's the master and who's the slave? The Bible says we're God's gracious servants. Yeah? So we're the servant and God's the master. Man in his infinite wisdom, as society grew, created government to manage us. Does everyone know what government means? Mind control, absolutely. So when they created government, what were they called? What do we call people in government? Public? Do they feel like they're serving us? Then, the sleight of hand, through some pensmanship, shall we call it, they created corporate government. Corporate government. So who's the master and who's the slave there? Who's the servant? Does everybody think that the Commonwealth of Australia is a function of government? There are two Commonwealths of government. There are two emblems. Greg and I were talking about this. What's on the emblem of the Commonwealth of Australia? Yeah, no. That's on the emblem of the corporate government of Australia. If you look up Commonwealth of Australia, it's registered on the SEC as a business. It trades, as is the ATO, as is every state government and local government. They are businesses. What's the lifeblood of a company? Profit. So then the government, because corporations, what's corporation mean? Corpus is dead, ation is to speak. It's a dead man speaking. Corporations can only deal with other corporations. So that's when they then created you, which was what AB ran through yesterday, your straw man, your person, your persona, your personality. That's where your name will appear in all capital letters, at least your surname. Check your birth certificate out. Check your bank statements. Check the fines that you receive. Your surname appears in all capital letters. Capitis, diminutus, maximus. No rights. You are a slave. So who's the master and who's the servant there? Why would you join to yourself to a dead man speaking? Is Mr. Darwin in the court? Yes, Your Honour, I'm a slave. You've joined yourself to your slave, to your corporation. So then they issue you with a number, a tax file number, or an ABN, or a birth certificate number, social security number if you're in the States, etc., etc. That makes sense? Why would you, when you are man and you are your own master, why would you join to yourself to a corporation that they've set up on your behalf without you knowing? Your mother did it when she informed on you. Have you seen the birth certificate? It says informant. What was she informing on? All right, quick lesson in trust law. Has anybody been studying trust law? And I don't mean in mainstream terms of accounting. Anybody been studying trust law through Franco Collins, Christian Walters? Christian Walters is the new trust technology, NTT, in the States. It's absolutely fascinating. I've learnt a lot from an Australian called Franco Collins, trying to get Frank out to one of these talks. He's absolutely fascinating. You can actually go to TalkShoe and listen to his conversations for the last 4 years. But here's a quick background. Firstly, ask yourself this: is there any law of physics, nature, or otherwise that demonstrates that anyone or anything can own anyone or anything? It's a rhetorical question. The answer, of course, is no. No one owns anything. We're all custodians, yeah? Stewards passing through. Am I in the right room? So when the powers of the day, and to this day, knew that consciousness was rising, and it is, there's been a lot of speakers talk about that, and that tyranny would have to be better disguised, they began their web of deceit. The Vatican, in 1302, through Pope Boniface VIII, issued a papal bull. Does anyone know what a papal bull is? Apparently, it's the word of God written through the hand of the Pope, and it's written on the skin of a kid. I'm not even going to get into what the skin of a kid is. So in this papal bull, they claimed, the Vatican claimed ownership over everything on planet Earth. I don't know, it sounds like a bit of an arrogant position to me. But because it wasn't renounced or rejected, that's what's happened. This was an express trust or a living trust. From there, and in the 14 and 1500s, they issued 3 more papal bulls known as the Triple Crown of Baal. These were testamentary trusts. So the first one was a living trust, which was written by living people. These are testamentary trusts. When does a testamentary trust take effect? When you die. So this was issued by Pope Nicholas V in 1455. And this bull had the effect of conveying the right of use of land as real property. So we're getting more specific now into land as real property or real estate through a testamentary trust. The second crown, which was known as Attorney Regis, was issued by whoever, doesn't matter, which was known as the Crown of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth. Commonwealth Games, the Commonwealth. Oh, we're all part of the Commonwealth. What do you think the Illuminati think the word Commonwealth means? What was the commoner? The slave, the peasant. Wealth is your sweat equity. Commonwealth is the sweat equity of the slave. This second crown was represented by the second Sesta Trust. Sesta is Latin for binding for life, which was created when a child is born, being the sale of the birth certificate as a bond to the private central bank of the nation, depriving them of ownership of their flesh and condemning them to perpetual servitude as a Roman person or slave. All courts throughout the world, other than in a few of the remaining countries that they're taking over by force now, work under these ancient Roman rituals and procedures. All rise. They start having you obey before they even walk into the room. So this is where the corporate you, or your straw man, was created. Looks a bit like AB. Had to get one back.
I actually wasn't listening. What did you say?
Yeah. The third crown of the ecclesiastical see, which was known as convocation. This Sesta KV trust was created by the parents. Now this is where it gets weird. The parents to the church or registrar being the gift of the title of the soul. Thus, without legal title over one's soul, a man or woman may legally be denied the right to even stand as a person and is treated as a thing. This is when the jurisdiction of the court moves into the Talmud. So I don't know, it's a little bit weird, don't you think? A little bit weird. This is what a birth certificate used to look like years ago. They used to take the footprint of the baby and of the thumb. What's the thumb? Is the pollex. Yeah? What a strange ritual. And blood. Why would they take blood from your child? They still do it now. They take it as a test for all sorts of things in hospital. I can tell you the rituals are still going on. But the pollex was taken, and this is where your name was then identified by you, where you've joined yourself to that name. If you want to change your name, what organisation do you do it through? Deed poll. All hidden in plain sight, guys. So just quickly, a few of the terms. I'm probably going to do one here, which is property. We so often use words that we think have a certain meaning, but we really don't know what the true meaning is. And we've had lawyers and barristers attend these. Some of them get it, and some of them get it on the day because I can see their faces. Property. What's property? Who thinks they own a house? Go on, be honest. Who thinks you own your house or your car? Property in law is actually the right of use. It's the fictional right of use expressed into a trust relationship with other forms whereby there exists a claimed form of ownership, form of trustees administering the form of property, and forms of beneficiaries. Sounds confusing, isn't it? Well, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. So when you go home, if you've got a title on your property, pull it out and have a look. When you buy a property in Australia, how do you buy it? Joint tenants or tenants in common? What have they told you that you are? You're a tenant. Which is why the CGS companies can just walk onto these farms because you're just a tenant. The farmer's just a tenant. There's all this story about, oh, we own the first 3 feet of soil. You own nothing. What you own is the right of, now listen to this, the right of use of the title, and the title represents a dot on a map. That's why they can just kick you off your property whenever they like. What does it say? RP, lot. Lot on an RP map. Lot stands for location of title. Who's getting this for the first time? Who's a bit pissed off? You own nothing. The Vatican owns it all.
As just while you take a drink there, I mentioned the castle yesterday because I love that movie. Any chance I get to reference that.
It's going straight to the pool room, mate.
You're going straight to the pool room. That's how the term compulsorily acquired sort of became used in the vernacular of everyday people, because it's, compulsorily acquired. What's Dale say? He's comparing it compulsorily. So they just take it. You don't have any rights at all.
All right, so we've talked about the public and the private, and we'll go through that a little bit more. But the ATO, I wonder if they're happy with us having their logo up there. Care factor, a 0. So the reality is that when you consent, and you do it voluntarily, when you consent to be part of the system, you do it via voluntary means. Now, it might not feel like it. Who thought they had to apply for a tax file number when they turned 17, 18, 19, where it was? Yeah. Did somebody hold a gun to your head? Why did you do it? Well, we'll talk about why you did it. You submit, sub meaning under, applications, applicate to beg, to be under their jurisdiction. Juris is the law, diction is to speak. You voluntarily submit to be under their jurisdiction. That's what you do. How did they do that? Oh, sorry, here's some proof. You mean mixing my slides up again? Thank you. This is one of my favourite forms ever. This is on the ATO site, guys. You can look it up. It's called a non-lodgement advice. So when you applied for your tax file number, you did it voluntarily. So if there's an in, they have to provide an out. So this is a brilliant form. You can fill it in, put your straw man's tax file number in there, put your straw man's name, the alleged date of birth or registration of the birth, and you fill it out accordingly. It's quite a simple form. It's a 1-page document. It's not War and Peace. But if you look 3/4 of the way down the page there, it says, reason for not lodging a tax form. One box is something like, I can't read it there, it's too fine, but it's along the lines of, quote something from the tax charter. The other one is, I will not have to lodge a tax return for the year, this is a 2013 one, they're on there every year, for 2014 or any future years because I don't want to. They leave you that little space there. So what a lot of our clients do is they write, for religious or spiritual reasons, please see attached. And they annex to it an affidavit of truth. Now, do you remember what AB said yesterday about an affidavit? An affidavit is your sworn truth of any situation. It's witnessed by a JP, and unless that affidavit is rebutted under the law, it will stand. Now, the affidavit's about a 6 or 7 page document. It's taken us a long time to write, and it's basically you letting the world know that you're a sentient flesh and blood being, and that you may at times, through free will choice, because we're not slaves, through free will choice, join to yourself to your straw man, if there's a benefit for you. Okay? It's a brilliant document. We've had hundreds of clients send these off to the ATO. How many times do you think they've heard back? 0. So you can remove yourself from that system. Now, one of the things we get peppered with is, oh great, so can I just lodge that and my employer won't take the tax out anymore? No. What did you sign when you got your job, a JOB, just above broke? What did you sign when you got your job? a tax declaration. A declaration is a sacred oath. You signed a sacred oath allowing your employer to take money out of your pocket and send it to the ATO. Geez, you're nice. I want to talk here about manufacturing consent. What is manufacturing consent? It's mine. No, you can't. If you're an employee, then part of being an employee is a public word, as is income. Income is taxable, as is profit. If you're a company, profit is taxable. I'll cover that in a sec. So manufacturing consent is mind control. How did they get you to voluntarily consent to do that? Because now that you have that knowledge, who would do it again? Okay.
No one put their hand up.
No. Anybody heard of this chap? Noam Chomsky. He's known as one of the highest intellects of our day. He's been an activist and crusader for a long time, since the 60s, I think. He's written hundreds of books. My favourite is Manufacturing Consent. If you YouTube Manufacturing Consent, you can watch a great documentary written about it. But he talks about manufacturing consent as a revolution in the management of democracy. Democracy, please. He talks about approaching it in two different ways, or two levels. They target two different levels of society. Firstly is what we call the political class. Yeah? The teachers, the lawyers, the politicians, the doctors. Their role is critical in forming popular opinion. So if you're going to start up a business, what's the first thing you do? You go to an accountant who says, hey, you need to set up a business or a trust or a sole trader or a partnership and apply for an ABN. That's how you have to do business in Australia. Why do they tell you that? Because they went to university. Uni meaning one, versity meaning version. One version of information that is mind control to tell you what to do as good little sheeple. Make sense?
Isn't it interesting when you actually learn what words mean? Because you think they mean one thing and then they actually mean something else. And by understanding, when the cop says to you or anyone says to you, do you understand? You nod your head. Again, we talked about verbal contract yesterday, but it's amazing. And if you get a chance to research legalese and get the Black's Law Dictionary, that sort of stuff, it actually gives you a really good understanding of how they use the terms and the words against you every day, every single day.
Yeah. Same with doctors. People get sick or a runny nose or an itchy bum, they go to the doctor. The doctor says, well, take some pharmaceuticals. Of course, that's what they're going to tell you. It's a $1 trillion industry, and so on and so forth. The next, of course, is the commoners, the rest of us. The ignorant commoners will follow like sheep. And why do they do that? Because they're easily distracted, aren't they? Why did they build the Colosseum in ancient Rome? To distract people, so they wouldn't start talking about what was going on, really. And how easily we're distracted. What are we distracted with now? Sport. What a distraction. I used to be a 110-kilo rugby player. I'd get up at 3 a.m. to watch the Wallabies. I was a committed sports fiend. What a fucking waste of time that was. How's St Kilda going? Who's winning the cricket? Who gives a shit? There's people starving to death and being raped. What about game shows? Lock it in, Eddie. Lock it in, Eddie. It's all about money, isn't it? Oh, a new car. What about politics? Politics itself is a distraction. They don't do anything. They're highly paid Muppet puppets that sit there blowing wind up each other's arse and arguing. Has anybody watched Question Time? Do yourself a favour, watch it. It's a farce. Mr. Speaker, I'd appreciate it if when the member of the opposition returned the report, I could get my stapler back, please, Mr. Speaker. Have you heard some of the stuff that they talk about? Please. Great example for kids, watching grown adults argue like children. Well, here's the master stroke of the ruling elite. It was the television, isn't it? Look at those hours that the average TV's on in a day. Guys, if there's one thing you get from today, turn your TVs off. We haven't been plugged in for 6 years now. And you know, when you've not been plugged in for 6 years, when we travel, sometimes we turn the TV on for shits and giggles. And we watch the news, otherwise known as the Comedy Channel. Steve went through it yesterday. It's an absolute joke. Turn your TVs off. Then when you go back to it after 5 or 6 years, you'll realise what an insult and an assault it is on your intelligence. Stop watching it. Stop reading the newspapers. It's a formula. Death, destruction, murder, rape, and at the end of it, they pull a kitty cat out of the drain just to make you feel good.
The same amount of death, destruction and rape as sport. You ever wonder why they do 10 or 15 minutes of news, 10 or 15 minutes of sport, and how Steve said it yesterday, oh, it's going to rain on Thursday. It's designed to have you to come home from work, from your slave role, Come home, what do? I'm tired. Plug into the Matrix and then be assaulted by all the shit that comes out of it. Don't do it. Do not watch the news. You don't need to know what they're telling you. The best thing you can possibly do is unplug the TV, no doubt.
When are you going to start?
After Sunday.
But even
I
sport.
think the Wallabies are playing.
Yeah. But what's sport? It's teams fighting against each other in opposition with a set of rules. You've got to stay by the rules or there's a penalty.
Everything's hidden in plain sight. It's all in plain sight. Absolutely.
Mainstream education. If there's any teachers or lecturers here, I apologise. Well, actually, I don't. I take that back. It's there. It's there to have people regurgitate what the mainstream view is. So when we set up our community, we're going to homeschool our kids. We're going to have a Steiner-based, Montessori-based homeschooling. Yeah. We're going to allow our children to let us know what direction they want to go in. I went to BBC here in Brisbane, and in Year 8 you get to do woodwork and metalwork, but in Year 9 it's an elective. And my dad said, I'm not sending you to the best bloody private school in Australia to do woodwork and metalwork, boy. Physics, biology, chemistry, all the stuff I couldn't stand. Let your kids do what they want to do. They will have a natural disposition or predisposition to where they want to go, and let them flourish at that. They will let you know.
And don't ever confuse education with intelligence. We're told that lawyers, doctors, accountants are higher educated. They're not. They're higher indoctrinated. Okay? They are the pick of the cream of the crop of the slaves and the sheeple. And they're told, you guys are better than the other slaves. So they're just slightly above. Ian mentioned yesterday, was it the proletariats, as far as the blockheads and all the other stuff that he explained on the sign. But those guys in the suits, that's your doctors and your lawyers. Why do they wear suits? Collars? Cuffs, cufflinks, tie.
Slaves.
They're slaves, and they're the chosen slaves to keep you even further oppressed. Okay, so higher education is higher indoctrination. Don't for 1 second think that is not the case, and don't ever confuse the two.
We say that to the lawyers and the barrister that we're working with, and they get it. They're awake to it now, which is nice. So what does the average person's day look like? The PAYG wage slave that goes off to work. I did this to Steph when we first met. We met through Kids Helpline, and Steph was in a whole world of debt. And I sat down, I did this on the back of a napkin. So the average wage slave turns up to work at 9 o'clock, if they're lucky. Most people have to get there earlier or they're fired. You get there at 9 o'clock and you work from 9 till 11 paying income tax. Income tax does not pay for infrastructure. It goes to the IMF to pay for the national debt. To who? Where'd the national debt come from? We'll talk about that later. From 11 till 1, you'll pay all the indirect taxes, and I'll talk about them in a second. So every time you fill your car up or you buy a loaf of bread and so on and so forth, you're paying indirect taxes. From 1 till about 4, you're paying your mortgage, your debt till death, or rent, which is somebody else's mortgage. From 4 till 5, there's a little bit left for you. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just a far more insidious form of slavery. That's what your day looks like, doesn't it?
4 to 5, you pay your credit card bills usually, electricity bills, how they're going up, all the rest of it. There's not many people left.
So we're going to talk about some alternatives, but the alternative is operating through a foundation, especially if you're in business for yourself. But don't feel that you're shirking your responsibilities to society. This is not about tax evasion, okay? You pay taxes every time you go and fill your car up, every time you buy a loaf of bread. And there are what we call compound taxes. So just look at a loaf of bread. It starts with a seed that's patented, that costs money for the patent. You then plant it. You then have the farmer who uses all his fuels, the patents on the tractor, on the motor, on the tyres. Okay? It then gets harvested. It then gets milled. It then gets sent to the baker and baked. And then there's the freight in between. Then there's the wholesaler. Then there's the retailer. How many taxes are in there?
Sales tax, GST.
So a $4 loaf of bread is about $3 worth of tax. When you fill your car up, do you know what? We've got a client, I think it's BP that he has. He's got 3 BP stations in Sydney, and he set up a foundation through us years ago. And he said to me years ago, I had a lengthy Skype call with him. He said, you know what, Mark? I think fuel at the time was $1.59 a litre. What is it now, $1.70 something? I don't know. I think it was $1.59 at the time. He said, you know what the raw cost of fuel is? 42 cents a litre. There are 7 taxes on fuel. 7. He said, I shouldn't have BP out the front. It should say ATO. That's where the majority of the money that goes into fuel stations is to the ATO. So do not feel guilty if you're going to considering to set up a foundation, that you're shirking your responsibilities to society. You are paying for infrastructure through your consuming. So let's all become more like Roman. So when you pay your income tax, we believe that it goes to a couple of these crooks here, like the World Bank and the IMF. I think the head of the IMF was here in Brisbane last week, walking around. So what are your alternatives? Well, you can continue to be a wage slave, or you can go out into the business for yourself, or if you're in business for yourself, you can operate through a foundation. Now, who's got a foundation in the room? Oh, wow. That's great. Fantastic. All right. So what is a foundation? It's an NGO for a start. It's a non-government organisation. And it is not -for-profit. A compound noun which has the exact meaning of what it is, a not-for-profit foundation. Profit is taxable. You can have a surplus because that's private. You can have earnings or sustenance, that's private. It's not income and it's not profit. Okay, so you can set up a not-for-profit foundation and operate. They work really well for belly-to-belly businesses. So for carpenters, builders, massage therapists, anything like that. But they also work great for other areas like retailers. But virtually any business out there can operate through a foundation. Sometimes not just directly as a foundation or solely as a foundation. You may need to run a hybrid situation, but we'll get to that. Okay, I don't need to show this again. Does everybody know who their straw man is now? Okay. I told you they did, OB. Why is that not going? Okay, so a public entity is a company, okay, public or private, a public limited company or private proprietary limited companies, they're public, they have ABNs and ACNs. Trusts, whether they're discretionary, unit trusts or hybrids, partnerships, sole traders, public foundations, known as DGRs or charities, are all public, and self-managed super funds. They have an ACN or an ABN or a tax file number, or you as your straw man. Now that's, I suppose I need to bring up here. A lot of people say, oh look, Mark, I don't really need a foundation because I just accept cash into my bank account. Bon bon. Your bank account is not your bank account, it's your straw man's account. It is a public entity because it has a tax file number attached to it. Go and ask your bank. Do you need a tax file number to open a bank account? Damn straight. So the ATO at any time can retrospectively come back and say, what's all that money?
And that's tax evasion, without doubt, 100% tax evasion.
So your private options are to run a foundation, a not-for-profit, tax exempt, non-government, self-assessable foundation, or a private trust. And it does not have an ACN or an ABN. If you don't apply or beg to be part of that system and have a tax file number and an ABN, you don't have to comply.
So just in relation to Graham, don't go direct to Graham. He will just send you straight back to us. If you want to go through the process or you want to talk to him or any of the other accountants that we will refer you to, make sure you go through Cherie first, because Graham absolutely cannot deal or set up with an unregistered entity because he's the tax agent. So he will only deal with the public stuff. He understands the private and he will explain to you how the two can go between them, but he's unable to set up the non-registered entity for you. We do that first, or through Cherie, and then we'll send you across there and he will explain how your personal circumstances fit within the foundation and how you may need a hybrid model or you may not. You may be able to work straight from that, and then he'll be able to explain all the taxation forms, because there are forms that validate the foundations as well.
AB's just going to run through here a great document. So if you are in the public and you have a tax file number or an ABN, this is part of the goods and services tax. This will show you what their jurisdiction has over you.
Yeah, it's one of the questions we get is, well, what can the tax office do to you if you're not in the tax system? Well, nothing. At that point, if you are completely 100% private. What we would then do is say, well, listen, if you're in the taxation system and you're worried about the ATO, you should be. You really should be, because you have to comply. Tax file number, strawman, you must, otherwise they will move you along and do whatever nasty things they say they're going to do to you, because you are in the public system with your strawman. You joined yourself to it. As an example of that, I'm just going to walk down here because I like to use the pointer. This is the current GST legislation, and I've read this thing from cover to cover. This is just one example of all of the taxation charters, okay? The Commissioner, who is the ultimate top of the tree, pyramid for the ATO, the Commissioner may disregard the scheme in making declarations. For the purposes of making a declaration under the subdivision, the Commissioner may A, treat a particular event that actually happened as not having happened. And treat a particular event that did not actually happen as having happened. And, if appropriate, treat the event as 1, having happened at a particular time and having involved a particular action by a particular entity, look, it's highlighted, and treat a particular event that actually happened as 1, having happened at a time different from the time it actually happened, or having involved particular action by a particular entity, whether or not the event actually involved any action by the entity. This is deadly serious. I didn't write that. That's the truth right there. It's just Google that. It's section 165.55. That's just on GST. You find similar stuff for pay-as-you-go. You find similar stuff for income tax. Okay, it is designed by them. It's their system to enslave you. They have complete 100% control. So that one is quite amazing, and we use it all the time, and people are shocked.
Is that part of a system you guys want to be part of? All right. So if you set up a foundation for those, there must have been 30 or 40 people putting their hand up. You'll know that when you issue an invoice, a foundation is underpinned by a document known as your Articles of Association. So if you have a company, you have your M&As. If you have a trust, you have a trust deed. When you have a foundation, you have your Articles of Association. Now, they've been amended a few times over the years. They're quite a beautiful document. So if anyone's in the room's got one of our foundations, would you agree? Hopefully you read it, that it's a beautifully worded document.
If you have an older foundation, we obviously have updated ours quite consistently in conjunction with the barristers and lawyers and so forth that we're dealing with, also our own knowledge, because there is a form, it's actually a non-profit guidelines, okay? And the form is an NAT 7967. I think we may even have a little picture of it shortly. But the 7967 is the form that actually allows you to supposedly work within the system as an NGO or not-for-profit. We would discard that as being irrelevant. However, there are a number of clauses that we've taken from the legislation and inserted into the Articles of Association, because it does make it then technically compliant should you wish to register it, and we have registered one foundation, so it's a precedent document, so it's accepted, and that has happened already. So these types of forms then allow you to deal with the public, so going between the hybrid and the public and the private models.
Yep. So you have your Articles of Association. We issue with minutes. So when we set the accounts up, you need minutes to set them up with the bank. Also templated invoices, letterheads, and so on and so forth, and quite a comprehensive frequently asked questions document. So when you issue an invoice, you don't issue a tax invoice any longer, because you are not public. You're not going to go and collect tax on behalf of the warmongering corporations masquerading as government. You are now private. You issue an invoice like you did in the old days, just an invoice. You must accompany it for the first time, and the first time only, with what's known as an NAT 3346 form. Okay, now what this form does is notice the company that you're invoicing that you are private. This is not a requirement that you need to do, because you are not under any jurisdiction. There is no regulatory authority, other than the laws of the universe, that regulate private foundations. They need it for their records so that they can use your invoice as a legitimate expense. Okay?
So this form covers their bum, not yours.
That's right. So if you've got people you're in business with regularly, you only have to issue it for the first time. From there, you just issue invoices. They have to keep it on their records for 5 years. That's the statute of limitations. But if I just show you the bottom of that form, if you look in the bottom right-hand side, this is my favourite bit, and it's in a box, so under maritime law can't be seen or heard, but it's there. It says, do not send this statement to the tax office. It's an ATO form that's printed off the ATO website, but they don't want you to send it to them. This is private. They are very different jurisdictions. But if the company is ever audited and asked why they paid an invoice that didn't have GST or why they didn't withhold tax, they have to produce this document. You tick the bottom one, which is the whole payment is exempt income for the... it's the...
There's actually two. There's actually three you can do.
Yeah. The most common one is the
the other one,
indented one.
Yeah, the second indented one is the one that is if you like, is a generic one. That's this one here, and it says it's wholly of a private or domestic nature from the supplier's perspective. That's you. So if it's wholly of a domestic or private nature, from your opinion, You don't have to pay GST. Or and just on this point, once you understand how this works, and if you read, so I'll take a step back. There's 888,000 not-for-profit foundations in Australia right now, as of the date of the, I think the last Australian Bureau of Statistics put it out. Only 177,000 are registered, to give you an indication of why and how that works. So why is it that every sports star or rich family in this country, i.e. the Salteris, why do they have foundations? Because they don't pay tax. Tax is for us, the sheeple, to pay tax. When you have enough money, you don't have to pay tax. Like
like Kerry Packer.
I was going to
he
say
turned up to the commissioner and he said, well, why aren't you paying tax? And he said, well, why would I give it to you buggers? You don't know how to spend it properly anyway. Do you remember that?
That is a brilliant quote, and I should put that on there. But I was referring to Jabba the Hutt, Gina Reinhardt. So I was trying to be polite, but she is Jabba the Hutt. There is no doubt about it. And you have that scumbag Tony Abbott leaning in, trying to take his instructions from her, as Ian pointed out yesterday. So what happens is she needs to put fuel in her massive big trucks, and she gets a $74 million tax break. She can afford to pay that $74 million, and it goes on over the course of time as $700 million is what she's saving in tax. Imagine we had $700 million hit the economy right now. We owe $380 billion just as Australia alone. What's interesting with this form is that you need to have the knowledge, and you get that when you go through your foundation and you read your articles, as Mark said. And once you've got the knowledge of how they work, you can then explain it, because the first thing that people do is go, well, I don't understand this form. Now, I had 7 conversations with the finance department here about this form. And it took till the end where the 7th person went, so you're going to have to speak to the 8th person. And he went, I'm not calling that guy. And they didn't bother to call me on that one. And they just accepted the form because it's an ATO form. So you got to stand by your conviction. You got to understand it and go through the process. And you will actually then have people go, okay, because this is a once only use form. So the person that you're dealing with, you send it to them on the first time you send them an invoice. And after that, you never have to send them another form again. The form is then for the ATO purposes if and when they will be audited.
Yeah. So one of the common questions we get is people, firstly, who in the room thinks that the foundation might suit them moving forward? So one of the first, geez, we're going to be busy.
Cherie,
so
where are you?
One of the first questions that people ask is, well, look, at the moment, Mark, I'm running a company or a trust or partnership or whatever it is. How do I transition from running a public entity to a private entity? There's a couple of ways you can do it. First way is to do absolutely nothing with the companies, or let's call it a company for now, for all intents and purposes. Do nothing. If you don't pay your ASIC fees, or you don't send your BAS statements off, what do the ATO and ASICs do? They write you, don't you? And ASICs especially will say, if you don't pay your yearly fee and fill in your form, then we're going to deregister you. You want to be deregistered, by the way. That's where we're going. So you just don't do it. Now, I'm not giving you legal or financial advice. I'm just telling you what I've done and what thousands of our clients have done. And we've opened up somewhere near 2,000 foundations so far. And just on that note, do you know how many foundations have been notified or contacted by the ATO in any way, shape or form? 0, because they can't. So what you can do is you can either do nothing and let them deregister you, and they will. AB's had 6 or 7 companies deregistered in the last 6 months. They'll deregister you. They'll write to you and say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we'll deregister. And they'll write to you again saying, we're serious. If you don't do it, we'll deregister you. Oh, fucking bring it on.
They fine you as well, by the way. That next letter comes with another $200 fine.
Yeah. Or you can ring them and get the appropriate form. I don't even know what form it is because I couldn't care less. But we've had clients ring them up. We had one client years ago, Hendrik, who was a mechanic, and he rang them up and he said, look, I want to deregister my company. What do I do? And they said, well, it's this form. I don't know what it is. $178, and you have to get your tax records all up to date. So you need your accountant to get everything up to date. We said, well, I don't have $178 and I don't have any money to contact my accountant to get it done. She said, well, we deregister you.
It's true.
And then she heard what she said and she said, have a nice day, sir. Do you see how ridiculous the system is? So you can do it, or you can do nothing and they'll deregister you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what it's simple. So I know, Paul, you run a foundation. I know there's lots of people here. It's simple, isn't it?
Really easy.
It's simple.
No records, no keeping receipts. And we talk about it. People go, well, can I run my car? Can I go and fill my car up and run it through the foundation? And the question, I always ask another question to answer their question is, well, would you like to? Because here's the thing. This is the aha moment, okay? The paradigm that you have has to change to here, because we are so 100% focused and told that we must ask for permission. You don't have to with the foundation. You are self-assessable. That's the tax office term. Self-assessable entity. So when someone says, can I pay for that? I say, would you like to? Yes, we'll turn that around. I can. So I can pay for fuel, yeah. Can I pay for my, the groceries that I'm going to go and pick up? Well, the answer is, would you like to? Yes. Well, you can, because the aim of the foundation is to achieve the goals and objectives of that foundation. And what happens is you have two people come together, have a meeting of the minds. Actually, that wouldn't work. Steph and I came together, had a meeting of the minds, and we set up a foundation to achieve a goal. We wanted to achieve a goal to do something, and that could be free to shine or anything else that you're passionate about. So once you've done that, you then fall outside of, and you're outside of the jurisdiction. You are actually then able to do anything you like to achieve those goals. So if buying the milk and the bread and all the rest of it at Woolworths feeds you and sustains you and your family so they can go to school, so you can now go out and achieve the goal of the foundation, then it's sustenance. And sustenance isn't taxable. Now, if you happen to get some income, and income is taxable, if you happen to get digits, we call them digits because they're electronic digits. It's not money. You don't have dollars in your account. You have electronic digits. So if the digits come in and it's more than sustenance, than you need as sustenance, that's then surplus. There's no limit for surplus. You can have as much surplus as you like. You don't have to have a percentage that you give away. We give up to 50%. So that's our decision. But on average, most people do 10%, something like that. If you're paying 33% tax now and you give 10% away, everyone in the room, I would assume, would like a 22% increase on their current wage pay, yeah? It's not hard, it's not brain surgery, is it? So I don't pay my 33% or my 46%. I can do what I like and save and help people, and I've got this extra surplus here. You can have as much as you like, and there is no percentage number that you have to give away because it's up to you. The paradigm shift is don't ask for permission because you don't need to in the private. You do in the public, you don't in the private. You can ring the tax office and say, hey, I'd like to open up a not-for-profit foundation. Can I operate that way? They'll go, yeah, sure you can. We suggest you register it though. They do. And, oh, okay, fantastic. So anything else? Nope. Off you go. Done. It really is as simple as that.
Yeah. So the essence of the foundation is to sustain the participants, anybody else that works within the foundation and the foundation itself, and to give back. Is that a tax dodge? It's not. You're contributing back to something that you feel passionate about. AB just mentioned the importance of registering or not registering. We had a client in Melbourne when he came back from the UK, I think it was 4 years ago. And I'm happy to tell you his name because he's got up at one of our Melbourne summits and explained the whole story. But does anyone remember the movie The Secret and the book? So David Schirmer is a share trader. He's the guy in there that talks about the parking angels and changing digits on his statement and all this money coming in. Anyway, he had an issue with the ATO for well over $300,000, so it was in the Supreme Court. And when I got back from the UK, he said, Mark, I'm in strife. They're chasing my companies and trusts for this amount of money. Can you come to court and under the Mackenzie rule be my advocate? As you can appreciate, I've been to court many times before and they don't really like me. So they escort me out. So I've only got the chance to help 8 to 10 people. They know exactly who I am now and they say, Mr. Darwin, it's time for you to leave. I normally try and get a few words in, but then the security come and remove me. So essentially what I love still is the Franco Collins perspective, which is do your own homework. Be a sovereign, be independent, and be competent so that when you have to go to court, if you do at any stage, you know how to act on your own reconnaissance. So anyway, he's nervous and I said, well, David, I can help you along the way with things to study, documents to write, and so on and so forth. So we did that. He submitted certain documents to the court. He turned up to the Supreme Court, and if anyone knows David, he gets up and speaks to thousands of people. He's a confident, intelligent man. But he was shitting himself. You know, to go to court is a scary place.
Scary.
He submitted the documents, got to court, and crossed the bar as a sentient being, which they didn't like, but he did it. And I think because they knew what was coming. The Supreme Court judge turned to the ATO before proceedings got too far underway and said, I notice here that Mr. Schirmer's companies and trusts have been deregistered by ASIC and the ATO. And the barristers were red-faced and shuffling papers and said, oh, yes, that's the case. And the judge very clearly said, So what jurisdictional authority do you purport to have in this courtroom? The entities are not registered. So please understand the importance of you registering your entities. You are signing over ownership under their jurisdiction. He gave the other side, being the ATO, 30 days to re-register the entities, which is illegal. You have to be part of registering the entity. Yeah. So the judge knew this. He said, I'll give you 30 days to re-register the entities or the matter will be dismissed. That was 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So you must understand the importance of registering. Now, please also understand that the courts are not going to want to set a precedent by actually hearing the argument that David had. Does that make sense? They do not want it heard. They don't want to set precedents. All right, what else do we need to cover? We set them up through, for a long time now, for the last 6 years, it's only been Westpac. We're now just bought on Commonwealth Bank and Bank of Queensland. So there now are 3 banks. Look, all the banks are crooks, but we need them, don't we? If we're in this world or of this world, unfortunately at this point in time, we still need them. So these are the banks that we set them up with. To set it up, if you've got the feedback form and you're interested, just tick that. Cherie or one of the team will be in contact. They hold your hand the whole way through. They liaise with the banks to get the accounts set up, and they have to be set up correctly. I can't tell you how many people we get coming to us that are in trouble because they've tried to do it on their own. If you don't set it up correctly behind the scenes, there are certain boxes when they're going through. One, for instance, I'll give you a little tip, is that all the banks will say number of employees. And if you're not watching, they'll just go, how many? Oh, there's 2. Boom, gone, back in the public. There are 0 employees. Okay, so with a company, you have a director or directors. With a trust, you have a trustee. With a foundation, you have what's called principal participants. Minimum of 2, maximum of 5. That's not our requirement, that's a bank requirement. Okay, so you have to have a minimum of 2 meetings of the mind participants, not employees. So you have to be very careful when these are set up behind the scenes.
And you can have as many as you like, by the way. Same thing with companies, if you want to quarantine assets and move things around and link them to a trust and all that sort of stuff, because there are private trusts that sit underneath. We're going to have question time at the end. There's no question time. So what's going to happen is that the trust can own the assets, and we're not giving advice again, as Mark said, but after an explanation with both the accountant and the lawyers, there is the ability to set up a trust to own your assets in the private, houses, cars and all the rest of it. Foundations themselves can't own the asset. Okay, but they can administer the funds, the digits that go in and out of the account.
Well, they can't register the asset. You can own it, but they can't register it. A registerable item like a home or property or a car has to have another public registerable item there. So when we buy this land, what we're doing is setting up a private trust, which is what's called a bare trust. The lawyers were here yesterday, our lawyers, setting up a bare trust. It's private. It's not registered. However, it has a company as the trustee. So when people buy into our community, they'll buy shares in the company. That then the trustee is the brain or the operator of the trust. So if ever they want to sell in the future, they can sell their shares. And in the shareholders agreement, that will relate to their plot on the land. Okay, but you can't own a registerable, or you can't have a registerable item without there being another public entity there, which is why we set it up that way. I just want to cover quickly, AB.
Sure.
The hybrid models. So we're setting up a lot of foundations at the moment for people in the mining industry. And you can imagine how happy they are. You know, some of them are on $360,000 a year. So you can imagine the tax that they're paying. Some of them are on contract basis, and they still have to pay the tax because they're running through a company or a trust or whatever it is. So when they set the foundation up and sent off their first invoice and the 346 form to Rio Tinto or BHP, what do you think the bean counters there say? What? What's a 334? What's a fan? No, not interested. We're only dealing with ABN businesses. So that's where you might want to run a hybrid model. So you can have an agency, and we've been using a particular agency at the moment, but we're setting up our own agency, or we're going to put it out there for one of our members to set up a company that has its own ABN, its own insurances, and that will act as an agent on your behalf. Okay, so there's probably people in the room that are doing that right now. So I know I caught up with Steve McSween in Melbourne, who's been doing that. He's on $300,000 a year, saving a fortune at the moment. So that company sends an invoice to Rio Tinto. They're happy because they've got an ABN, they've got all the insurances and so on and so forth. That company then keeps 5% for an admin fee and then sends the rest to his private foundation for him to disperse as he sees fit. So there's 101 ways to skin a cat. Does that make sense? So you can run a hybrid model if that doesn't work for you.
And of course, using an accountant who understands the public and private, says, okay, well, we'll do your tax return on this side because you still keep doing that if you have a public entity, and goes through. And if you don't make any profit, then income tax isn't applicable. And then how you, under your own personal circumstances, they will explain how you then get that across to the foundation to suit you and your needs. And there's a couple of, you can donate it, but then the problem with donations means that people think, oh, I get the gift deductible receipt or deductible gift receipt, DGR. I get that in, then I can use it on my tax. Well, you can't double dip. So it's public as public and stays there. If you donate that to the Glenn McGrath Foundation, registered, you get a tax, so a deductible gift recipient receipt, and then that is used to then claim on your tax return. On the other side, the term that is used most commonly is cost of services rendered. And cost of services rendered is your sweat equity. It's what goes into it. So if I don't come to here today and put the effort into it, well, that would be a disaster, really, I think, if you were left to do that by yourself. But that being the case anyway, I would take cost of services rendered. Okay, so my effort, my sweat equity, that's all you need to do. If you want to think of it in public terms, it's like a consultancy contract. The contractor bills out for his time. As far as the invoice is concerned, it's exactly the same, but it's cost of services rendered, most commonly used.
Yep. So, I guess what we're going to ask here is what legacy you're going to leave. The essence of the foundation, as I said, is to sustain you, and whether that's food, your fuel, gym membership, holidays, whatever it takes to sustain you and keep you happy, but it's to give back. And for us, we're very passionate. Is Steph still here? I mean, Steph's an animal rights activist, big time, and so we give to Free the Bears, Sea Shepherds, a big one, and there's a couple of others, Charity Water, but our main one is Free to Shine, and I'm going to talk to Nikki very soon. And I can't tell you what an amazing feeling it is every time we send money off to Nikki. A couple of weeks ago we sent her another couple of $1,000. She's like, so grateful because I sent it on the Tuesday. She said, that means Thursday, Mark, we can go and save another, I think it was 6 girls. So, on those tough days, and we've got tough days, don't we, where it's hard to get out of bed and trudge off to work, when you know there's a deeper purpose to what you do, it makes it a lot more fulfilling, I can assure you.
When you know that your income tax goes to fund both sides of every war, and it actually goes to fund the death and destruction in Gaza right now. I mean, Steve did it beautifully, the extremists, blowing them up and all that stuff, and it's funny, and it was hilarious, but it actually happens, and they burn those kids alive with white phosphorus. If you came to the summit in QUT with Max Egan, and he put the pictures up of all the kids and little Nua,
has anybody seen Max's talk on YouTube? If you want to watch, if you didn't come to the last summit, you can watch it on YouTube. It's a harrowing story. Max went in from Egypt and he crawled through a tunnel for 1.5 kilometres, and the tunnel is no taller than this. So Max is not a young man. He's literally on his hands and knees for, I think it was 2 or 3 hours to get out the other side, and spent a lot of time in Gaza. The story you're getting told on mainstream media is not what's going on in Gaza.
So
these guys are fish in a barrel. They're getting absolutely murdered and slaughtered by the Israelis.
That last bullshit you heard if you watched the mainstream media. So Nua and her friends went to the UN school, all dead. Every one of them is dead.
Yeah. So if you want to run a foundation, ask yourself how it would feel. Who would you want to support? Support what you're passionate about. Roman said it perfectly. Do what you love.
Yep.
Do what you love and be passionate about it. All right. We're getting this guy out in July next year. This guy is tough as they come. I'll tell you what, he's such a crusader. And I love what he says about this being a political position. This is a political, ethical, moral, and spiritual position to be able to operate this way, and it's your right. And he and I'll go to fucking jail before I consciously send 1 cent to a government that kills my brothers and sisters. I will go to jail for that. I hope that wasn't one of those boomerangs that Steve's talking about. So I talked about volition at the start of the weekend, which is the hypothetical choices. You guys have hypothetical choices, but I hope now that you want to take the action and collectively take with more knowledge some action with your ability and knowledge and wisdom. Okay. So where to from here? Tick the box. Cherie or one of our team will be in touch and help you forward. So I hope that made some sense. Where are we at to now?
Why do you need two people in the foundation?
It's a bank requirement. It's not ours. It's a bank requirement.
Do you actually need 2 people?
No, you need 2 people that have to be identified by the bank. Now, what you can do is you can have, and this is an important point. So for those of you who are just single operators, you can have a what's the term, AB? The silent participant. Okay, so they have no access to your accounts. It's reflected in your articles of association and your minutes that you have a silent participant. So they're really just there as a token to get it set up. Now, AB is very clever with contracts. So what he's done in those instances is he's put it time sensitive. So the silent participant is there for 30 days only, and then they drop off. Now, the banks haven't come back to us and said, hang on, there's now only one participant. So the silent participant can drop off after 30 months, and then effectively you have one participant. They have to be an adult.
One of those forms you said that was in a box, so it really wasn't there, or it was invisible.
Yep.
Just explain that.
Oh, under maritime law, anything in a box can't be seen or heard. It's not admissible in court.
It's why when you fill out a form, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, you put your name in all capitals because you're dead. In a box, you can't be seen or heard. And why is it that every government form has the little boxes? Because we want to be able to read it or spell it correctly. Bullshit.
Yeah.
It's absolute bullshit.
It's fiction.
The box.
It's fiction.
It's fiction.
I was just wondering if you can have variable hourly rates. If you've got different sort of activities in your business, some attract a lot more money than others, so to be reimbursed.
Yeah. And not to be facetious, but you remember what AB said? You just asked, can I?
Yeah. Would you like to?
Would you like to?
Sure you can.
There's no regulatory authority. Now, that just reminds me, though, that what a lot of people do is, so if you're PAYG and you'd love to operate a foundation, who's a wage slave and would love to operate a foundation? So what you can do is approach your employer, a public term, and say, look, I'd like to contract and be responsible for my own super and my own tax and so on and so forth. Can we come to a contract arrangement? I've got to tell you now, it's a 50-50 as to whether that'll be accepted. The smaller the business, the easier. You get into big businesses, especially if it's Queensland Health or something like that, no chance. But if you want to contract with that organisation, then that's what you can do, and you just renegotiate a rate. So if you're on currently $35 an hour plus super, you might go in and say, look, I'll look after my own super. How about we do $40 an hour? Or whatever it is, whatever you negotiate. That will then be a contractual arrangement between your foundation and that business.
Loud voice?
Loud voice. Or if you tell it, I'll repeat it quickly. So you're a participant in your foundation. What hourly rate? Oh, that's the agency model. All right. That's all by negotiation. And it really does come back to I can. It's whatever you want to work it out to. So, but as a participant, there's no hourly rate. You just pay yourself. So for Steph and I, whatever's there every week, we look at what we need to pay and we sustain ourselves. Yeah. By the way, sorry, if there's any particular, really particular questions, Cherie will do a Skype call and answer all those.
For those of us who have foundations, and it's...
Hi, Mel.
Hi. If anyone wants to ask me any questions in the break, I set up a foundation with these guys years ago and I've just done amazing things with it. But you talked about updating articles of association and that sort of thing. Something I haven't done, something I've often thought about, like I know how quickly laws change and that. Is there well, I know it's not about asking, but is that something that we can tap into you guys for and help with and so forth?
Yeah, it is. It's there's a basic hourly rate for that service, so it's not the same price again. For example, it's just a simple hourly rate, and depending on who does it, be it Cherie or Greg or someone else or me, they'll just say, well, here it's what it is, and then you pay for the document. So as long as the cost is covered, we obviously, if Cherie's going to do 50 of these things, we obviously have to pay her. And,
I think she updates them for $100. There you go. That's the short answer. Hey, Mel, thanks for sharing that. And, Paul, I know heaps of people here that operate foundations, and it's really nice because they email us all the time saying, this is who we're giving back to, and this is what we've done, and so on and so forth. So it's amazing. Thanks for sharing, Mel.
Yes, once we've established a foundation and we want to purchase goods, do we still have to pay GST to our suppliers?
Yes. I mean, look, yes and no. So
we can't claim that back.
Well, how can you claim it back? You don't do tax returns.
Yeah, the short answer is a yes and no, because if you actually are able to negotiate with the supplier, the use of the 3346 form once, that's it. You don't have to do it anymore. So, for example, we didn't pay GST on the room. In this
Saved us
instance.
almost $1,800.
Work that back as to how much the room cost.
Just on sending out that one form that you're saying you have to send out once, if you're dealing with multiple people as in your business or your foundation, do you have to keep sending that form out to them? You do. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's not for you. That's just to cover their bum. Okay, so what happens is if they get audited, they go, well, why didn't you charge GST on this particular sum? Like, for example, here. And they'll say, well, because they gave me a 3346 form. And they go, oh, okay. The accountant or the person dealing with it doesn't know what that form is. As long as the tax office doesn't care, then they don't care either and moves on.
And just so you know, once you set your foundation up, we're not a set and forget. We're not good luck, all the best. We are our ongoing services there. So as you have any questions, Cherie and the team are there to answer them. Or if they're tricky particular questions, AB and I will step in. But they will come up. And, the biggest paradigm shift is in getting that there's no regulatory authority. So many people 3 months later go, what do I do with all my invoices? Or all my receipts? What do you want to do with them? It's so easy, isn't it, Paul? It's so easy operating a foundation. It's how it should be.
If you already have trusts and self-managed super funds and companies, I can understand the deregistering the company. I love that.
Yeah.
Can you still maintain your trust and bring that under the foundation?
Not under the foundation, but you can still maintain all those public entities if there's a derived benefit for you. Now, AB and I have to be careful about what we say when we're answering public questions. So we would then direct you to Graham or one of the other. Now, by the way, that brings me up to, so yes, you can keep them if there's a derived benefit for you. Yeah. So
I, for example, don't. I still have public structures because I need to deal in the public sometimes. I explain my answer to that question usually would be I would spend 90% of my life is in the public. In the private. 10% is in the public. So I go back in and out when I need to, but I now know that door is two-way. I get in and out when I need to. It's really quite simple, and we don't have time for me to give the analogy, but essentially, you don't have to ask for permission to leave to go through that door or to come back in. Do it at will, because if you want to go through it, you can.
Just a quick one. If you don't register your business name, does that mean you can still put like copyright on your website, things like that? Yep.
I'm not sure, actually. That's a good question.
You're going between the two worlds again because copyright is registered. You can, and in fact, I'd probably just get you to talk to Sam Backman, who is copyrighted her name and she has foundations and stuff. She would be the best person to answer that from a first-person perspective as opposed to us giving you advice. But essentially, no. Anytime you're going into the public, you are now visible. Think of it as blinkers. They can't see anything that's not registered. They can't. It's not part of their system. They can't. It's like I explain it like it's like Santa Claus. Everyone knows Santa Claus exists, okay? But how do you get to him? How do you sue him? How do you send him statement of claims or anything else that goes with it? You send a letter to the North Pole, sure, but how do you get him into court? Because he doesn't physically exist as far as a concept does, but the actual entity isn't there. So the foundations are no different. You can't see something that you can't physically touch. So they can't see in the private, only in the public.
Yep. So there's only one rule in running the foundation. That's do no harm. Pretty simple one.